well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We love talking about the history of Clearwater. It's near and dear to all of our hearts. We'll start just by introducing ourselves. So I'm Kat. I am the current director at camp and was a camper and leadership and counselor, and so happy to be back in this role.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm the current assistant director. I was a camper from 2004 to 2012, and then a leadership and a counselor as well. And yeah, just really happy to be here with all of you learning about camp and things.
I'm Christy Stott. I'm the current office manager at camp. Second year ever on staff, but I was a camper from the early 80s to the late 70s through the mid 80s.
And have a lot of family.
And I have family. Yeah.
And my name is Lori Smith. I never got to be a camper. I found out about camp when I was too old to be a camper. But I was on staff from 1989 to, I'm not even sure. I was there for my college years, took a little break. My husband and I came back. We got married at camp and worked together at camp from 1999 until about 2012. So,
and during that time co-directed with Sunny, one of our directors. So.
And now I'm on the board.
Yeah. So I'm not an expert on Clearwater's history. I'm just doing the best I can. So it's going to be kind of a team effort. I know we've got some special guests in our audience. So if I say anything that's incorrect, or if you have things to add or know more than I do, please chime in. This is going to be just a team celebration of camp's history. And we are listening to maybe the only CD that we recorded of camp songs. One of two. So singing is a huge part of our camp culture, and so we just wanted to share some of those songs with you guys. So we'll sort of have that on the background. So yeah, if you aren't familiar with Clearwater, this is the mission of our camp: to foster confidence, courage, compassion, and community, 4 points on Clearwater's compass, by providing a traditional sleepaway camp experience for girls. And then our vision: to provide the Clearwater camp experience to as many girls as possible, because we know it makes a difference in their lives and they will make a difference in the world. So that's just a little bit about who we are. And now we're going to go way back in time to tell you guys about how Clearwater started. And we can't start talking about Clearwater without talking about Camp Minocqua and the Spragues. So Camp Minocqua was a boys' camp that was founded in 1904, a wilderness-style camp for boys on Lake Tomahawk. It was an 8-week summer camp for boys ages 8 to 17, and core camp activities included morning exercise, swimming, canoeing, tennis, baseball, nature study hikes, and extra activities were basketball, volleyball, track and field, fishing, horseback riding, and special canoe trips into the wilds of Canada for the older boys. And in 1912, Dr. Sprague opened Potawatomi Lodge across the bay from Camp Minocqua for families of Camp Minocqua campers. Am I missing anything yet?
No. It was kind of the old school lodge type thing where people ate communally and you just have your little rooms, and a lot of families, their boys would be up all summer long, and mom and dad would take the train up so they could stay for a week at a time or a long weekend and enjoy the North Woods while their sons were having a blast. Across the bay.
So then we meet Sarah Holliday Sprague, who established her first camp called Holiday Camps on Lake Okoboji in Iowa in 1914, after graduating from the University of Iowa with a degree in education and receiving a master's degree from Columbia University. And she also had spent time working for the Gulick camps in Maine and for Campfire Girls. And so in 1931, at the age of 46, Sarah Holliday married John Sprague. And this was just an interesting fact that I really like, that John Sprague was also the first president of the Midwest Camp Directors Association in 1914, and so that was one of the organizations that later became the American Camping Association, which is a very prominent organization which sets standards and guidelines for all camps across the country. So it's pretty cool that our roots are the roots of that organization, something that we can be proud of. So shortly after they got married, Sarah moved to Minocqua and sold her interest in holiday camps. And around Christmas time in 1932, the Spragues made the decision to start a new girls' camp. And in the summer of 1933, Clearwater Camp opened on nearby Clear Lake. So that's where we get our name. And to this day, Clearwater campers and staff still celebrate Christmas during the summer camp season to commemorate the beginning of Clearwater Camp.
Oh.
That's cool.
And
Yes.
just an aside, when they first opened Clearwater Camp in this area, it was located at the site of Red Pine Camp, which was here just a couple weeks ago doing their presentation. So Clearwater was there for 2 or 3 years
I think 3, yeah.
before moving to their current site.
So Mrs. Sprague, known affectionately as Colloquy, wanted to build a unique camping experience for girls and young women that would provide them with the opportunity to learn about themselves and others, develop a deep love for nature, and grow towards purposeful maturity. And those first summers on Clear Lake began the traditions of sailing, swimming, riding, arts and crafts, music, and tripping that would come to define Clearwater Camp for many generations. This is a quote that I love about the first summer of Clearwater that Colloquy wrote. So she said, in 1933, we had 19 campers, 8 counselors, 2 kitchen staff, and 1 director. The Ida B sailboat was one of our first possessions on the lake and a fleet of canoes and rowboats. We tripped and tripped. Riding was always popular. Our first tennis courts had been scraped out from the forest lands and covered heavily with salt below the clay. Every morning the deer licked the salt and daily deer tracks marked the court. Just sort of gives you an idea of what that first summer looked like for them. So, as Christy said, there was a move from Clear Lake to Tomahawk Lake. So in 1936, Colloquy and Dr. Sprague decided to move Clearwater Camp from Clear Lake to the site of Potawatomi Lodge. The lodge was closed and the Spragues purchased the 5-acre Gifford Island, and the iconic wooden footbridge was constructed to connect the mainland to the island. So that's how a lot of local folks know our camp, because they see it on Lake Tomahawk and recognize that wooden footbridge. So it wasn't always there, that's when it was built. And in the winter of 1938, cabins were dismantled from Clear Lake and numbered. Pieces were carried by truck, station wagon, and trailers to the Tomahawk Lake location, and then by barge and ice boat to their present location on Gifford Island. So it was quite a process to take camp apart and move it to a new location.
And so one of the cabins called Midship was the camp store originally, and it had like little cubbies, and you could tell it was definitely not built as a cabin, but it had many of the elements from the original structure, and I think that some of those pieces are still there.
Yeah, yeah. I wish there were like pictures of this process of moving the cabins and the ice barges, and it just seems so like such a process. Like a lot of work. In 1938, Clearwater Camp began its summer season at the new location on Lake Tomahawk, which consisted of 75 acres of beautiful natural land. The main buildings of the Potawatomi Lodge became central buildings for Clearwater: the dining room, the deck, and the hold, which is our main office. And I don't think I mentioned this in here, but all of our buildings at camp are named after parts of the sailboat. So I don't know if that was the case when it was at Clear Lake. I would imagine so. It was, yeah, just part of, so sailing was always a huge activity for us at camp, and so every building is named after a part of the sailboat, thus the deck and the hold. The property lies within Potawatomi Colony, a nature preserve and neighborhood made up of cottages and homes, many of which were built by Camp Minocqua families. Residents of the colony seek to preserve 1,000 acres of woods and other natural elements for use by all of its members.
And I just want to say real quick that the dining hall, deck, and the hold, the original structures are still used today. There hasn't been a lot of tearing things down, building things up. We have a few new buildings, but largely we still use a lot of buildings that were built in 1936.
Yeah, and I would say the dining hall and the hold, especially when you walk in them, it feels like going back in time. It's really pretty magical to see how it's been preserved, and you can feel all the generations that have been in those spaces, which is awesome. Okay, a little bit about Clearwater traditions and culture. So Clearwater daughters model themselves after the voyageurs who traveled long distances to find adventure, fellowship, and meaning among the lakes and waterways of the North Woods. This is exemplified through our rigorous tripping program, as well as our Sunday evening council fire, where each camper and staff member still wears the traditional kaput and sash worn by voyageurs long ago. So it's a little hard to see, but in that bottom picture, they're standing around the council fire ring and wearing these hats that we call kaputs. And, that was one of the first years of camp, and we still wear those hats, and we still cross our arms and say the Clearwater Pledge like that. So a lot of these traditions we've been doing for almost 92 years, which is pretty special. Very cool to be a part of that lineage. So for 37 years, Holokwe guided the camp's growth and built the traditions that still make Clearwater Camp a unique retreat for girls and young women. Anything to add? All right, so next we're going to talk about our next long-running director, Sylvia Sunny Summer Moore. So Holokwe wanted to ensure that the camp would continue under the direction of a leader who would respect the camp's values and traditions. And in 1969, she chose Sylvia Sunny Summer Moore as her successor. Sunny, who had earned her nickname as a first-year camper because of her infectious disposition, had been a camper for 6 years and a leadership and counselor for 3 more. And at the time, Sunny was a young mother of 5 children who were all campers at either Kipmanapa or Clearwater. And as the story goes, Holokwe told Sunny, "My dear, you must take over running Clearwater Camp or it will close." So it wasn't so much an offer as
Yeah. That was in the form of a question.
At camp today, we call that being voluntold to do something. And so the picture at the top is Sunny in the middle as a very young camper, and then at the bottom, she is 3rd from the right. Yeah. With the help of her family and other former campers and counselors, Sunny stepped forward in 1970 to ensure the continued success of Clearwater. From 1970 to 80, Sunny worked tirelessly with her co-director, Molly DeHaven, to increase enrollment through nationwide recruitment efforts. Their efforts paid off, and attendance grew significantly from 67 campers in 1971 to 156 campers in 1980. So, huge growth. In 1972, Holokwe passed away at the ripe age of 87. Following Holokwe's death, Clearwater Camp was inherited by her stepdaughter, Grace Sprague Cameron, and it was sold in the early 1970s to a group of Clearwater friends committed to its preservation. And in 1975, Sunny and her husband Donald became the principal owners of Clearwater. Sunny continued to direct and create an incredible legacy of leadership at Clearwater for the next 3 decades. And as a side note, I was a camper when Sunny was a director, and it was an incredible gift to get to know her, and Lori worked closely with Sunny. And
thinking about how Sunny did recruiting, and back when I was, my story is a little different, but she would travel to gatherings, mostly word of mouth, but some of my contemporaries were, Sunny would take, she had this little blue Buick that she would drive across the country all in the off season to recruit people or recruit campers and staff. And one of my friends has a very vivid memory of Sunny spending the night in her dorm room.
No!
In like the mid-80s.
That's wild.
Yeah, at UW-Madison, hanging out in the dorms. So as an older person, and so she had an incredible gift for personalizing everything and making people feel like they were very important, no matter what they did or how they did it. And she spread that everywhere she went.
For sure. So a little bit about camp in the early 2000s. In 2004, Lori and Perry Smith became co-directors, working under Sunny as executive director. And over the years in their numerous capacities at camp, Lori, Perry, and Sunny blended into an energetic and effective team, combining the enthusiasm of young leadership with Sunny's vision and experience. Also during this time, Sunny was instrumental in developing another succession plan for Clearwater Camp by forming the Clearwater Camp Foundation. So this was established in 2003, and the foundation's goals were to purchase camp from 6 shareholders and run it as a girls' camp into perpetuity, to raise money to maintain and repair camp's buildings and grounds. As Sarah mentioned, not much had happened to the buildings and grounds since it was founded, so it needed some work and some upkeep. And to establish a scholarship fund for campers whose families may not have been otherwise able to afford the Clearwater Camp experience. In 2008, the Clearwater Camp Foundation successfully purchased the camp from the 6 shareholders, and a $7.5 million capital So in the fall of 2010, Sunny Moore transitioned to Executive Director Emeritus status after a more than 40-year tenure leading Clearwater Camp. During her tenure, she had increased the camp's enrollment to an average of 120 campers each session. That's a lot.
It didn't work for them that either.
I was going to say, I remember those days. Now we're closer to 100 per session and it still feels full. She had a knack for not being able to say no to people, I hear.
There was always room for one more.
And developed a loyal core of campers and their families from all over the world. On April 7, 2011, Sunny passed away. The camp community continues to celebrate her effervescent presence, marching forward to maintain the strong traditions, values, and mission of Clearwater Camp. And before she passed away, the community came together in a really beautiful way to create this memory book, which I think maybe at the end I'll bring that up because it's a beautiful, beautiful tribute. Kind of anyone who had been a camper or counselor or had any interaction or love for Sunny was invited to contribute pictures or a note or anything, and camp was able to give it to Sunny before she passed, and she was just so moved and thrilled, and it's a really beautiful tribute. So, and I put this picture in here because that's one of my favorite memories of Sunny. We have a tradition at our camp of reading this story called the Tadger Tales. The Tadger is a mystical creature that I think comes to many, not just our camp, but
It's actually published through the ACA.
yeah. So it's a kind of a common camp lore. Tadger is part tiger, jaguar, badger. Am I missing something? And comes out when there's a full moon and is full of folly and causes all sorts of mischief all over camp. And at Clearwater, what that looks like is that the Tadger will go around to cabins at night and paint campers' faces while they're asleep, and sometimes leave them little treats in their socks. So when they wake up, they are covered in paint, as are their sheets, and they've got little treats to enjoy. So Sunny, each session, would read the Tadger Tales, and she was an excellent storyteller and just embodied all the voices, and it was like every camper was just so captivated, and it was really special. And that's one of my favorite things to get to do as director. All right, so then over the recent history, these are some of the directors that have led camp, Liz Baker, Beth Owen, and now myself. And then we wanted to put a little bit on there about Clearwater's current capital campaign. So this is a comprehensive master site plan that the planning started in 2019, and it was really, a conversation amongst the board and staff about how we can update and upgrade camp. As I said, a lot of these buildings needed a lot of work, and so it was really an opportunity to look at how camp is functioning as a whole and how we can make improvements. And so $3 million donated by our community members allowed us to complete the first portages of the plan. So if you don't know, a portage is when you're on a canoeing trip and you carry the canoe across land, and so we do so much canoeing, we wanted to adopt that metaphor. So the first portage was building mainstay. So this is our welcome center, wellness center, just a really wonderful lodge, sort of, that's right when you come into camp. So it's a great way to enter camp. So that was a huge undertaking, building that building. And that's the one here at the top. That's mainstay. So that was completed at the beginning of camp last summer. And then we moved our tennis courts from the waterfront up to this beautiful spot on top of the hill, as you can see here. And that was a difficult decision because those tennis courts had been there from the beginning, and for a lot of people that felt like a core memory of camp. But it was such a valuable space, and we thought it could be utilized as well as a green space, and also the environmental impact of continually repaving the tennis courts on the waterfront. Lots of things went into that decision, but we're really happy with updated sport course that we have and the beautiful green space we get to enjoy on our waterfront now. And then portage number 2 is the bottom picture. Oh, and backstay is that middle picture. That's our maintenance building, which is a really big upgrade from what it was before, which was a tiny shack where the roof was literally collapsing.
And that used to be where Mainstay is now. So you drive into camp and the first thing you'd see is our maintenance building, which wasn't the best. So now we've kind of flipped where those are so that it's a little bit more welcoming.
Yeah. And then portage number 2 is that bottom picture. So we've got some upgraded staff housing that's actually going to be completed at the end of this month. And the impetus for that was that we have such a great desire to bring more senior, older staff members back to camp. We love our college age counselors, but we really want to sort of balance out the energy and also have some more mature members of our staff to sort of lead and mentor those younger members. But we need a place for them to live because they don't always want to sleep in a bunk bed with, 5 other counselors. So that was the motivation for that portage, and we're really, really excited to be able to have those to use this summer for amazing senior staff. And then future portages that we are hoping and planning for is expanding our dining hall a little bit. So as we mentioned, it does get quite full and crowded in there when we have a full camp. So we want to expand a little, not to add more campers, but just to be able to spread out a little bit more. And then our kitchen also needs some love and attention. So we want to upgrade our kitchen, a possible wetlands classroom we're hoping for. And we have some really beautiful bogs at camp. So we're talking about some ways that we can embrace and celebrate those and have more learning opportunities with those environments. Possible ropes course, definitely some shoreline erosion control, upgraded storm shelter on our island, and adding more bathrooms to camp is always a need. Always. So just wanted to include some pictures. We had so many old historical pictures. We wanted to share some from the last few years at camp. So you can sort of just see what Clearwater looks like currently.
So a lot of people wonder why there's the hump in the bridge. And the reason that is there is that sailboats are moored on one side and the boathouse is on the other side, and where the rowboats are moored there. So the campers will take the rowboats under the bridge to get to the sailboats, and that hump allows them.
And otherwise they would have to go all the way around the island, and it would be a very long row. Yeah. Some more pictures of camp. Yeah. Oh, we'll come back to that video, I think, at the end. And then a little bit about our activities. So, we have a lot of the same activities that we had way back in, plus some upgrades. But yeah, a little something for everyone at camp. We've got some campers that are really into the water activities, sailing, water skiing, canoeing, and then some that are more into land activities, riding, or archery, or arts and crafts, which is great. So there's that diversity of interest and experience. Something for everyone. So does anyone have any questions about camp or the history, or? Yeah, Carol.
Do you do all of your activities on site, or do you do overnight or extended camp stays in the wilderness, or?
Good question.
Yeah, we didn't talk about our tripping program. Do you want to talk about tripping?
Clearwater has always been a tripping camp, and most of the adventures, canoeing was the primary preferred method for tripping. And I'm not sure exactly when backpacking started, but
That's a good question.
trips, there were trips in the area, like the Manitoush River. We still use some of the same routes, that as long as we can, I'm assuming. It's been a little while. But backpacking, I know there are people who at camp have strong feelings that tripping is really meant to be canoeing. And with the advent of kayaks and stand-up paddleboards and other floating devices, that canoeing has remained the core, but we've branched out. And then we've added, as time went on, campers have a choice. They can choose to canoe or backpack. And then there are trips that campers can choose to do a week-long sea kayaking trip in the Apostle Islands. and those are for the older campers. And then we do have a week-long Boundary Waters trip, which is called the Canadian. It used to be in
Okay.
Canada, but we don't often get to the Quetico part of it, so it's mainly the Boundary Waters. And then we've had some years where we've had what's called an advanced trip, and Kat was an advanced tripper. And so she did it start out on Isle Royale?
Yeah.
So they did a backpacking trip the length of Isle Royale,
Mhm.
and then they spent a few days rock climbing, and then they went into the Boundary Waters for 10 days. So
Yeah.
it was like
Wow.
a full summer
Yeah.
experience. So that has happened on rare occasion, and I think early, like in the
I wanna say there's been, like,
70s, well, Grace was part of
4 or
an advanced
5
trip
that I know of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Uh-huh.
and some of that was dependent, the year that trip happened, we had a lot of campers that were really wanting to do something more than just a 3 or 4 day trip. And so they sort of proposed it, and we kind of revived what we knew about the advanced trip program.
Yeah, it hadn't been done since the 70s
Correct.
at that point, which was pretty cool. And
How
we
many
get-
weeks was it?
So we did 10 days in Isle Royale, then I think 3 days rock climbing, and then 10 days in Canadian, and did on either side like 3 days at camp to like do packing out.
So they used the
packing
A-frame
in,
for
and-
that.
Yeah.
That
And
was
it was-
kind of like the hub where they started. And
Yeah, pretty, I mean, just a core memory for me. So that was, we were 13, does that sound right? 14?
Probably
14.
Yeah.
And so it was the last year that we could have been campers. And we did that trip in place of, so it was about the length of a session, maybe just under. And we left halfway through first session, and we got this big send-off from camp during council fire, which was amazing. And they like read letters from all of our parents about how excited they were for us and what an amazing opportunity it was. It was very emotional. And then when we came back, it was halfway through second session, and we got this amazing welcome. And the final challenge was that we had to get from our campsite, which was at the A-frame, which I don't know how many miles. So we had to get,
About 9.
yeah, we had to walk or run from that campsite to camp. So they were like, okay, this is the last thing. You guys are gonna get yourselves back to camp. And so we, on the Bearskin Trail, they took our gear for us, but it was just like the last physical feat to run or walk back to camp, and then the people that were a faster pace waited for us so we could all run into camp together and like holding hands, and it was like just so magical, and started the tradition of long trips. Now whenever they come back, they run into the lake when they get there and jump in to celebrate the end, and that's where it all started. So that was 2004, no, 2002. I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah, but in terms of just like standard tripping, our youngest campers, so that's the harbor age campers, they start with just an overnight, so it's like a 2-day, 1-night trip, and those are pretty close to camp. So we have a site right across the lake where they'll canoe to and stay over, or the Newland campground, which is what we were talking about.
So those are the kids who finished 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade.
Okay.
So that one, we're just trying to like have it be a fun introduction, not scary, really, short and sweet. And then our next age group, the Cape, they do 3 days and 2 nights, and it'll be a little further away from camp. I'm trying to think of what those routes would be like.
Flambeau.
Yeah. And at that point, they're sort of starting to take on a little more responsibility with like helping build the fire and helping make the food a little bit, and like learning those skills more. And then our point age campers, the oldest age group, they do 4 days and 3 nights. And by that point, they should be able to lead a lot of those skills and be cooking the meals. And it's sort of like at that point, the counselors are more like supervising and assisting, but the hope is that they're taking the lead. And then as Lori mentioned, we've got those extended trips for the people who are like really gung-ho. And so we've got Canadian, Isle Royale, sea kayaking, and sometimes a sailing trip too. So yes, our tripping program is robust and something we are very proud of. And I will also add, it's often the highlight of our campers' camp experience. And it's also often the thing that they are most nervous and anxious about. And I think those go hand in hand, because it's like such a huge challenge for them to overcome. For a lot of them, it's the first time they slept in a tent or been out in the wilderness, and it's really scary and they're really nervous. But seeing them come back and seeing like like the sense of accomplishment and everything they learn and how they bond together as a team. And also the counselors. It's scary for them because they're taking a group of young people into the wilderness, and just the growth that occurs on those trips is.
Yeah, does the whole cohort go together?
So it's interesting, Clearwater does trips a little bit different than other camps will go by cabins,
Okay.
where the whole cabin would go on a trip, and we mix and match intentionally for activities. They don't do activities by cabin. They have individual schedules, so everyone's mixed and matched, so they have maximum opportunity to meet as many people and get to be friends with as many people as possible. So they fill out a preference sheet for their trip, and then based on those preferences and then the timing of the trips, they get assigned to trips. So they don't always know who they're going on trips with. So it's not like, hey, all my friends, let's try to do this.
Okay.
It's very intentionally mixed, and I think that is one of the best parts of Clearwater.
Yeah, and they're all led by our counselors, except for sea kayaking. We get a guide for that, but everything else, Canadian, Outer Royal, all the trips are led by our staff. So we do a pretty intense trip training as a part of our staff orientation, teach them all the skills that they'll need, and they go on a practice trip where they, put everything into play. And yeah, I think that's cool that they're led by our own counselors, and so we're not outsourcing anything.
Yeah.
And the majority of our counselors were campers themselves, so they've been brought up in the program and know it pretty well. Yeah.
Where have you taken sailing trips? I've
The
never
Apostle
heard of
Islands.
Oh.
Yeah.
And there have been some that were just overnights on Lake Tomahawk, where
Yeah.
they'll sail down to Indian Mounds.
Mhm.
Where they've done like an
Yeah.
overnight there, where they've sailed down there and back, just like an overnight.
On Apostle Islands, would you charter, like,
Yeah.
rent a boat? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So we usually have like one counselor that goes with, and then have like a captain that accompanies them.
And we did do one trip up to Grand Marais. There's North House Folk School is in Grand Marais, and we connected with them, and the girls got to sail a schooner up there. And then while they did that, Perry and I did a paddle making course. Somebody had to drop them off. So they've done a few, and it sometimes just depends on the year.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have a question?
Well, if you will indulge me for a minute, this whole evening has changed a lot because I've been fangirling over some very special guests who are here, and I just want to introduce them to all of you. This is Dare and Mary Brumell, and if I may say, Dare would not be here if it were not for the Boys and the Girls Camp. And his grandfather started Camp Minocqua. Holopi was your step-grandmother, basically.
Right.
I mean, you were all adults, so whatever. And I grew up hearing stories about your mom, and
We still hear them.
I'm sure maybe half were true, and the other, no, they were all
Well, they were pretty much.
they were
all
probably
true,
pretty
yeah.
true. Anyway, and I'm so honored that you guys came tonight because
The strangest stories that you heard about my mother were true.
she was canoeing. I mean, she came out of like the Clearwater tripping program, and as I don't know, how old was she when she was solo canoeing through Canada?
In her
And
60s.
yeah,
Middle to late 60s.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Amazing.
she was badass.
She really was, yeah.
Yeah.
They could do a presentation just
Oh,
about her.
seriously?
Yeah, you guys should have a
Yeah,
night just.
no, I mean, I think that actually a Camp Minocqua presentation would be really cool. But anyway, so I'm sorry, I know I've been sitting up here with this.
Is there anything that you guys want to
But
add
I'm just
about
like, you're here.
any of the history, any anecdotes or stories or?
You got a few hours?
So,
Well, thank you for
We were
being.
partially responsible for your water skiing program. Because Camp Minocqua, a boys' camp,
Yeah.
had to take up water skiing as soon as that became popular and everything, but Holopi did not want to do that because it wasn't ladylike.
Yeah.
And we kept talking to her about Holopi, you have to do that, these kids want it. And, no, a girls' camp is a girls' camp, and a boys' camp is a boys'
Oh.
camp. I don't know how many
Yeah.
times we heard that.
And I think it wasn't until one of Sunny's first years that the water skiing program started.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting.
and it's both donated by the Pabst young camper at the time. I totally did not understand why the boat was named the Blue Ribbon. But I was like, 40 when I finally figured that out.
I had an incident with the Patch family. I grew up in South Dakota, so we had no water.
Right.
I didn't have any experience with camping or anything like that, but met there in the Twin Cities, and he dragged me into the woods, and I've never gone back to the prairies. But the very first summer we were here, in 1967, I was working in the Camp Minocqua office. One rainy, stormy day before camp had started, there was just nobody around. I was all alone in the office, and this man walked in, and he had this shirt on that looked as if a cat had given birth on it. I mean, it was just ratty. And I thought, oh my God, I just got here and I'm gonna get violated right here in the camp office. I didn't know what was going on. And it was Bill Pabst. And he turned out to be one of the nicest guys that you could ever meet. He was just really swell. But they were descended from the Pabst Blue Ribbon family.
Right.
But they were running, Steam Beer Brewing, was that
Yeah.
Pabst? Or was that Maytag? A lot of family names, famous names have gone through these camps.
Yeah,
These just
absolutely.
great people,
Cool.
down to earth,
Yeah,
outdoorsy.
that's awesome.
Anyway, thank you for indulging me.
Yeah, Carol. I wanna hear more about the wetland
Classroom?
classroom.
You should very passionate about bogs. Yeah, so the idea hasn't been fleshed out, but we have this bog that's kind of right in the heart of camp.
Yeah, I wish we had a map.
Yeah, and there's been an idea of building some kind of boardwalk that goes out over it, and then perhaps like a round
Gazebo type?
gazebo. I feel like they've also talked about it feeling like a bird's nest.
Yes, the bird's nest.
But a space that, like a class of, 10 or 15 campers could gather and learn about the bog and the wetland environment around them. So I mean, that I think would be part of the dining hall expansion. So, if we had our way, it could be in the next 5 years, but we'll see.
There's a really old map of camp, but because nothing's really changed, the bog is still on here.
Okay.
So-
Yeah, and another cool thing about this bog is that in the old layout, when we had tennis courts at the back of camp, there was, tennis net that was blocking the majority of it. And so that was, I think, a kind of unexpected surprise of moving those tennis courts
Opening
was
up
that
a
it
lot
just
of rooms.
opened up a lot of camp, including the view of the bog. And so now when you come in, you can just really appreciate it a lot more, which I like.
Still get campers from all over, or who does the recruiting now, or?
Well, we don't quite have to have the same effort that Sunny did. We've been lucky that we have so many returners and so much word of mouth. So, I mean, we don't do a ton of camper recruitment.
We're gonna grow our own.
But I would say the majority of our campers come from the Midwest and particularly the Chicagoland area. Which I think in Sunny's day it was a bit more spread out. A little more like St. Louis, Indianapolis,
Yeah.
Minneapolis.
A lot of contacts.
We get, and I think it's common for a lot of camps in the area, just
Yeah.
so many from the Chicago area. Sometimes it feels like too many.
And back in the day, they all took the train up anyway, and the train left from the Chicago Northwestern Station, so it made a lot of sense that that's where most of the campers would have been from. So you guys have to correct me if I'm wrong with this, but the Camp Minocqua and
The cars,
Clearwater.
I just read that too.
Yeah, the camp, they would be on the same train, but have separate cars, because you could not have the young men and the young ladies on the same car. And then when it got to the station, the young men would get off the train on one side of the tracks, and the women would young ladies would get off on the other side of the tracks. I'm sure there was a lot of waiting at the time, and then they were taken to their camps.
Yeah.
Did they still get off at the Woodruff station, or was there a station that was closer to Clearwater?
It was Woodruff, and what I just read, I
Yeah.
think.
And then Lake Tomahawk.
Oh, yeah.
In later years, the boys.
It's the Bearskin Trail now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The railroad.
Yeah.
Yeah, originally.
And I didn't realize at the beginning that it was, you would get on at night and the evening and stay over and then arrive at camp and set in time for a Clearwater morning breakfast.
I didn't know that.
You still have 2 sessions?
We do, yeah, 2 3.5-week sessions, and then a handful of campers that stay for all 7 weeks.
And the program is still sort of embedded in the original 7-week schedule. So there's a lot of, you can see it in bits and pieces of camp where we do quirky things, but a lot of it is based on that 7-week schedule.
Yeah. We don't duplicate this
Yeah.
session.
Quirky is good.
Yeah.
How about counselors? Do you have trouble recruiting them, and are you kind of doing the international thing too? Like I know is kind of the norm for camps,
Yeah.
because they want to give that international.
Yeah, I would say we definitely have to put more effort towards staff recruitment than camper recruitment. And I
Is
would.
it tough? I mean, or do you usually have?
It kind of depends on the year.
Okay.
This is my 4th year doing staff recruitment, and I would say it's gotten a little bit easier each year. And this year in particular, we have a lot of returners. It's the first, so I mentioned we said leaderships at some point. That's our CIT program, the people between campers and counselors. And so we typically have anywhere from 8 to 12 leaderships. And this is the first year since I've been back at camp where we have every single leadership from 2 years ago coming back as a counselor, which is really cool. And like I said, the majority of our counselors were campers themselves, so we're really lucky to have that pipeline going strong. But we still recruit a fair amount. How many new staff members?
I think we only have, so we have 45 total counselors this summer, and only 15 of them have never been to camp before.
Okay.
And typically we're about 10 international staff. Yeah, around, give or take.
And I would venture to guess that you're gonna, because you're building momentum and you're getting more counselors, and then it used to be where we would have 1 or 2 new counselors.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're
Getting back to that point.
You're building that momentum.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Do you have to take a year off at some point in your time?
That's a good question. It had been that way for many years, and just last year was the first time that we gave people the opportunity, if they wanted to come during that gap year, because we find that we lose a lot of people during that gap year, that they go do something else and then think, oh, maybe I don't need to keep coming to camp. So our thought was that we could try to have that consistency and keep them coming. It's a hard year because it's the summer after their senior year of high school, so many people want to be with their friends or be home or whatever. So I would say
We've been offering it for 2 years and we've had 0 takers. So it's there, but people want to be at home, especially I think because so many have grown up thinking, once I finish my leadership summer, I'm going to have like my first summer in 5 years at home with all my friends. And so it's difficult for them to kind of take that step back and be like, okay, I guess instead I'm going back to camp.
yeah. So it's kind of in flux.
That's interesting. That's totally a culture thing, because at my camp, everybody came and there was a large burnout factor, so it was the opposite story of like, maybe we should take a year off.
Oh,
This year off
interesting.
idea is very interesting because then they would be more mature and grateful and come back and not just be like, we own the place and, yeah, so it's a totally different narrative.
But
Yeah.
that's how it has been. But I also think in this day and age, people are nervous about internships and like establishing in other places. So there's been a little bit of pull both ways.
For sure.
But oftentimes when people do take that year off and they come back and they bring something new to camp that they did in their gap year too, which is helpful sometimes.
Any other questions or wonderings? Well, we have so many cool artifacts and photos we want to share with you guys, but I do have a little video that we are going to share that's just some pictures from last summer that is just a nice way to close out to show you what camp is like today. So hopefully you can see.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll say
question.
Yeah.
What are your rules or positions on cell phones and technology?
Yeah, we are very proud to still be a technology-free camp. So campers have zero access to phones or screens of any kind the whole time they're at camp. And our counselors have to hide them from campers' eyesight or earshot. So all staff phones are kept hidden in a staff cabin. They can't ever have them out in front of campers. The only people who do might be me or Sarah or Christy or our healthcare team, but other than that, we try to keep it completely technology-free at camp.
Wow.
It's our camper parents appreciate it the most. I mean, a detox from technology has never been more needed. And we also encourage our counselors to like embrace the opportunity themselves. I know it's good for all of us too, so it's one of my favorite things about camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, thank you guys so much.